I did it again. I snooped in on History Valley's YouTube channel. I should probably stop being this sneaper, whatever you want to call me kind of guy. And I had to drop a few super chat bombs in History Valley's YouTube chat. Go subscribe to History Valley, my friend Jacob Ehrman. He was interviewing Dominic Crossan, and of course, I don't know what my fascination recently is with Dr. Crossan, but I had to ask him. Dom, there are some apologists who make some bold claims. What do you say about it?
Before we get to the next slide, we got a super chat question from MythVision Podcast. Thank you for the $5, Derek. He says, amazing guest, Dr. Crossan. When Paul says Jesus was buried, what kind of burial do you suggest Jesus had? Common grave? Love you guys.
Okay, let me go into this without losing our continuity. When Paul says buried, I'm not convinced that he's really thinking of a burial at all. I think it's like you and I might say he's dead and buried, almost like hyphenated, dead and buried. It kind of affirms really dead. So I think when Paul says dead and buried, I think what he's after is Jesus was really dead. Now, there wasn't some kind of a mistake that he was just, I don't know if he's thinking, I would put it positively, I don't think at all he's thinking about the finding of an empty tomb. I don't think he's thinking about that at all. That's another question, why that? So I think his dead and buried doesn't mean anything more than we might say dead and buried. And if I said, where's the person buried? You say, well, I don't know. I just mean he was dead and buried. He's certainly dead. It's a way of saying certainly dead. So I don't think it gets into that. But we may want later to talk, because that's an historical question. And at the moment, we're not talking about an historical question. We're talking about two versions of it, whether there's a source here. At the end of this, I will come back, if you remind me, go back to what do I think as a historian about the burial of Jesus when I read all the materials. I will come back to that. So let me go back then. I think we're ready for a third one, Jacob. I think with the Guardian.
Oh, yeah, he's got another question that he super chatted. Let's take a look at that real quick, and then we'll move on. MythVision, thank you for the $5 again. When Christian apologists tried to argue that Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose again, literally, how would you respond to these bold claims?
Well, the first thing I would tell them, and I'm going to be very blunt on this, most Christians, and I'm saying this to most scholars too, when they use the term rose, they don't know what they're talking about. Because rose in the first century, resurrection, did not mean the same as, for example, ascension. This gets me into the whole book Resurrecting Easter, so I'm kind of dancing carefully not to jump too far ahead. But please understand, in the first century, there was a pan-Mediterranean understanding that very holy people like Moses, or very powerful people like Romulus, could be taken up to God or the gods upon death. If they happened to die, it didn't make any difference. They were raised up. The term is apotheosis in Greek. They were raised up. Now, resurrection is not a pan-Mediterranean. It's not a pan-Jewish. It's a sectarian, Pharisaic concept. It has to do with the fact that there is justice in this universe, and at the end of time, God will raise all the human race for judgment, and heaven and hell as sanctions. That's the claim of Pharisaic Judaism in the first century, which says to the Sadducees, who are quite happy with the way the world is and thinks it's perfectly just since they're running it under the Romans, of course. The Pharisees say, no, this world is a just place. It's just postponed judgment. Therefore, there will be sanctions. So if you're talking about, as Paul talks about Jesus, 1 Corinthians 15, being raised in the sense of anastasis, that's the key word, you're making a huge claim that anastasis, resurrection, with Jesus, is the beginning of the general resurrection. And Paul says that absolutely clearly in 1 Corinthians 15. In fact, He says, if there is no general resurrection at the end of time, there's no Jesus resurrection. No Jesus resurrection, no general resurrection. It never occurs to him, because it couldn't conceptually, that Jesus might be raised as a special privilege because he's the Messiah, or he's the Son of God, or whatever. By all means, ascension, fine. That's completely in the thinking of the whole Mediterranean. If I was a Roman, I would say your Jesus doesn't deserve it, but I have to admit that my Romulus got it, so maybe your Jesus would get it. I'm going to say, when I show you images of Jesus in Eastern Christianity raising Adam and Eve with him, you see it on the cover of the book behind me. Jesus is reaching out and taking Adam and Eve, who represent the human race. They ain't just two guys who he feels sorry for. When Jesus takes, in the Eastern tradition, not in the Western tradition, the Western tradition, he comes out all by himself, typical Western individualism. It's all about me. In the Eastern tradition, he comes out taking by hand Adam and Eve, the human race. Now, I've never had anyone able to tell me how Jesus literally took the human race out of the tomb with him. I have had people, and not silly, telling me how Jesus came out of the tomb all by himself. Of course, whether you think it happened or didn't happen, you can understand it. It's possible. But tell me how anyone could bring Adam and Eve out with him literally, and that changes the discussion. No, I think there are far, far bolder claims being made by saying Jesus saved the human race, Adam and Eve, than are being made by simply saying, well, he came out. In fact, one early writer said, Christian writer said, the big claim is not that he came out, the big claim is he didn't come out alone.
Join MythVision's Patreon today to access hundreds of videos that I have worked hard in high quality content that are not in public domain. They're only on the Patreon. You will also have direct access to me, referring academics, questions, ideas, or just want a private chat. You have that access with me. Also, I'm trying to do more traveling to educate people from more academics and expand what kind of material I do produce on MythVision. This is a full-time gig, and you're helping the community by joining. I'm trying to put together more to educate people who have harmful cultic practices or ways in which they're harming society. We are educating them from MythVision on better understanding these ancient texts and mythologies and history in a way like not many shows do. So please, I could use your help, and you're going to get and benefit a lot by joining as a member.